Welcome to the Florida Real Estate and Entrepreneur Podcast, where we interview the best and the brightest business and real estate leaders. Our mission is to inspire and help 1,000 entrepreneurs to start and succeed in real estate and entrepreneurship. We will give you the exact playbook to succeed in your business through the experience of those who blaze the path. We're bringing the what's working today directly to you. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Florida Real Estate and Entrepreneur Podcast. I've got an awesome guest today, my man Jeremy from Spartan Media. What I love about Jeremy is he used to be a Marine, so you already know he's an awesome dude. He also does a lot of stuff with entrepreneurs in the PR space. He does a lot of stuff in the media space. And being a real estate investor, I got connected through a group. Guy's just amazing. And Jeremy, we are excited and pumped to have you, man.
Thanks for having me on, brother. Appreciate it.
Cool. So people are like, what the heck is a PR media guy? What is that? What kind of industry is that? How do you do that? Like, what is it? How'd you get started? And why are you connected to so many real estate investors?
Oh man, that story is one hell of a journey. Lots of good, lots of bad, lots of challenges, and a lot of lessons learned. In a nutshell, you mentioned I'm a Marine veteran. I got out of the Marine Corps. I started my first agency way back in the day, back in 1999, in fact. And that was a massive failure. Did not take off the way I had hoped it would. Started another agency later, ran that successfully for many years. And then I was blindsided by this health crisis. I think you and I have talked about this before, where I was essentially on my deathbed for about 2 years. And during that time, burned through all of my money, just trying to stay alive. And as that's happening, of course, I'm gone from the marketing world, right? I'm nobody. I'm a ghost. And so when we got to the point where I basically had to get back out there because we had run out of money, couldn't even continue any kind of treatments. What I ended up doing without really having a plan for it was I ended up leveraging public relations in a way that put me back on the map faster and bigger than I'd ever been. And I kind of rode on that for a while, but then I look back at it and I'm like, shit, man, this is something that everybody needs. There's awesome entrepreneurs out there who are great at what they do. They really care about their clients, but they're not great at promoting themselves. They're not great at telling their story. So then you've got these other douchebags, like some of the folks you and I have talked about who are great at promoting themselves, great at scamming people out of money, but not actually delivering any value. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to drown those people out and help the legitimate experts really elevate their status so that not only can they achieve more themselves, but now they can serve others on a larger scale and help more people. So that's kind of the journey in a nutshell from, out of the Marine Corps to where we are today from a business perspective.
So did you do something in the Marine Corps that was media related?
No, not at all. I was actually a grunt. So, there's always the joke that, the grunts are the dumb guys in the military. The reality is, as you know, it actually takes a tremendous amount of intelligence to be in the infantry because there's so much going on. You've got all this chaos to manage. You're leading people. You've got a tremendous amount of knowledge that you have to learn. You have to have good people skills, leadership, attention to detail. Like there's just so much to it that people don't realize.
And you're given an incredible amount of responsibility at a young age, at a young experience level. And for those who don't know what a grunt is, that's a enlisted infantry guy or an officer, guys and gals who shoot, move, and communicate, kick doors in, that kind of thing. I too was an enlisted grunt. And yeah, the skill set you get from that is like what I call FITFO, figure it the F out. There's no task that you just can't figure out how to make it happen well and timely, just because the way you were trained and brought up that was the only option, because the consequence of not performing could be literally life and death. And that's a heavy weight for a young 18 to 22-year-old to carry. But so many in our nation carry it well even today. So I'm a huge fan, obviously, because I know what it takes for, what it took for you as a young enlisted infantry guy, what it took for me, what it takes for thousands of others. So, well, thank you for your service, man. It's genuinely a big deal. I think those words are hollow sometimes, but they really do mean
yes.
something. So that's awesome. Okay, so let's just kind of go back to that time. So you get out of the Marine Corps, and what's interesting is a lot of Marines who are infantry guys believe like, man, I don't really have a marketable skill set. Like I didn't get trained certified, licensed on something, but I have a lot of intangible skills. So what I typically see those guys do is go, I'm going to go be a cop. Why? Because a cop carries a gun and they also shoot, move, and communicate. Although is that the best career choice? Probably not, for a lot of reasons, or maybe they just want to serve. So you get out, and how do you talk to me about that transition? Like, you get out, and how soon after were you in this media world where you started your own thing, and obviously it didn't go well, but
yeah. So, well, the first one I started was the web design agency in 1999, right? Now, there's actually some interesting backstory to that. When that folded and I lost, at that point, I lost everything I had saved, throughout my time in the Marine Corps. I think I was about 22 at that time. At the time, I always believed that, it failed because I started a web development agency in 1999 in a small town in Florida. It's just wrong time, wrong market, all of that. Reality was that was bullshit, right? We could have been cold calling people in New York, LA, whatever. There's a million ways we could have attempted other approaches rather than just local businesses, right? So, but that happened. I learned a lot from that, rolled into my next business, which was a full service agency. And that was actually where I got my first kind of dipping my toe into the water of media. There was a tool that had just come out around that time. I think this was right around 2005-ish. And there was a tool that had come out called HARO. It's an acronym for Help a Reporter Out. And basically this guy would compile these queries from journalists, right? Journalist is doing a story on XYZ, right? Veterans in real estate investing, for example. And he wants an expert to talk about some particular aspect of that topic. So this email would go out to everybody 3 times a day. And if you saw something that was relevant to you, you could then hit a little link and it would reply, but it would hide that reporter's email, but it would let you reply to them with your pitch, right? Telling them about you and your response to that question, whatever. And it was an opportunity to get featured in the media kind of outside of that normal publicist journalist relationship, right? So it was super cool back in the day. It's basically become useless today. But I remember there was one with I believe it was the Tampa Tribune back in the day, and which I think no longer exists. But there was a journalist looking for something about insight as to whether or not businesses should be creating websites and getting on the internet, right? So that gives you an idea as to how long ago this was.
The answer is yes.
So, we had a little email exchange back and forth. I answered some of her questions. She's like, I'd really like to do this in person. And since she was local, it worked out really well. We got together at a local coffee house. She further interviewed me and that kind of thing doesn't happen anymore. Now everything is all digital, but we went back and forth. I ended up on the front page. I've still got a stack about this big of the newspapers from back in the day, but I was on the front page of the business section in this article in the Tampa Bay Tribune. So, that was kind of how I first got into PR. But like I said, it was a full service agency. So we did a little bit of everything and then evolved in what that offering looked like over the years until we eventually pivoted to focus entirely on PR a few years back.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, can you imagine if you knew then what you know now? You're talking 1999. We're on the precipice. Google isn't even a thing. There is no social media. There's no Instagram. There's no Facebook. Meta doesn't exist in its form. There's so much opportunity at that time, which is correlation to today. Is there are people who are taking swings of the bat and it's not working out, but 10 years from now, they'll look back and go, I wish I would have took 5 more swings, because if I would have just hit one thing, I could have been Zuckerberg,
Yeah. Well, and that highlights the importance of focus too, right? Because I look back at what we're doing now and I'm thinking, if back in 1999, I was just like, let's just go all in on PR. That's all we do. If I had that history of focusing only on that, just think about the traction that would create with all of that time in that industry.
Oh my gosh, it would have been crazy. Okay, so I'm really curious, so Spartan Media, what is a media company? What kind of services do they buy? I think a lot of people know about paid media, like ads. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure people are as familiar about the PR portion of this or that stuff. So talk to me about the media industry and what are the components of it and how does it work?
That's a great question. And it really is something that most people don't understand. And unfortunately, most people think that they do, right? Which is the case with most topics. When it comes to media, people think about, let's say something like Forbes or, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. A lot of people will just see something in the media and think, oh, hey, I'm featured in the media, right? But a press release, for example, is not a feature. And this is an area where there's some nuance where, a lot of times people will go and they'll pay for a press release, which doesn't cost much. And usually it's fairly ineffective. A press release isn't going to do much for you these days. But people will go and put out a press release and then they'll say, oh, hey, I'm featured in such and such outlet, right? And it seems harmless enough, right? We're telling our friends we got featured, but really it was a syndication, right? It seems like a meaningless distinction, but I'll give you an example of where not knowing or ignoring best practices can really hurt you. So there's a guy, and you might know him. I think you and I have talked about this story at some point a while back. First of all, he's in the real estate space, but he came from an engineering background. I don't know if you've worked with engineers before, but they have a tendency of thinking they know everything about everything at all times. And this relationship was terrible from the beginning. But he comes to me one day and he's like, hey, I want to do a press release. I was like, okay, well, has something new happened? Because the last time we talked, you hadn't really done anything new. There's nothing newsworthy. There's nothing that anyone really get excited about. Not that you're not running a great business, but there's just nothing newsworthy. And he's like, oh, well, I got accepted into the Forbes Council. I was like, all right, well, that's not newsworthy. If your credit card clears, you can get accepted into the Forbes Council. I've seen some of the most moronic content ever proudly published on any of the Forbes Council articles. So I was like, look, this is not newsworthy. Putting out a press release about this is actually going to harm your reputation, because what's going to happen is if a journalist is looking at you considering featuring you in a story, and they're going to see that you put out a press release announcing that you got accepted into a pay-to-play program, they're going to doubt your credibility, right? They're not going to want to feature you because you're showing signs of being deceptive. And he's like, yeah, but I want to be able to say that I was featured in ... all these different outlets. And I was like, no, that's not what it is. That's syndication. That's not featured. And that will hurt you even more, the journalists. And I thought I had talked him out of it. And then one day he and I are on a Zoom call that I had set up with a journalist at the Wall Street Journal. And she's interviewing him. I'm just kind of in the background to make sure nothing goes sideways. And she's like, oh, well, I see that you were featured in ... And I'm like, oh, shit. I'm immediately thinking that he did what I thought he did. He ended up putting out the press release anyway, against my advice. And the reporter, she says, oh, well, I'm on your social media profile here, and I see this in your header, in your banner, all these logos. She's like, do you have links to these stories that you were featured in that I can kind of pull these and use some of this as some background material? And I was like, oh, shit. I was like, Erica, why don't we go ahead and put a pause on this for now? Let me get back with him and figure out what's going on here. And he's like, oh, well, I put out a press release and that's what that was. And he's just like stuttering and stammering. And so we had to pull the plug on that. And, she says to him, she's like, look, man, I cannot feature you anymore. And I can't feature you in any of the outlets that I write for. She wrote for Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and US News. And she's like, not only can I not feature you, I have to tell my bosses at these other outlets as well. And so he's essentially on a blacklist and won't be featured because of doing this, because he misrepresented himself. And that's where things can really go sideways when you don't know the right and wrong way to do public relations. It goes bad pretty quick.
Yeah, that's why you have professionals to tell you do and do not do these things. So that's interesting. Okay. So I've had on marketing agency owners. And when I say marketing agency, I'm talking mostly paid ads and that kind of thing. I've had on salon owners from the Florida area. I've had on developers and builders and real estate agents and real estate investors. So I get a wide variety of entrepreneurs on the podcast. How does working with somebody like Spartan Media help their business? If I go to a media company, I'm generally thinking I'm going to do something with media. It's going to bring me attention and clientele, and then it's going to result in revenue. That's where an entrepreneur's mind is, particularly in a small business where maybe they're kind of focused on brand, but they're really focused on, I put $1 into media, I get $3 back. So how does because you're a little more holistic than this, right? Your brand and all kinds of stuff. So how can that help a small business owner? Yeah.
So, looking at it as a PPC versus PR kind of thing is really an interesting model, because on the PPC side, that's very direct, very transactional. It's like an immediate kind of one for whatever relationship. On the PR side, that's more of a holistic, long-term strategic play. It's getting featured, but then it's leveraging that in your marketing. It's using that to build your authority, to build your credibility, close sales faster, right? So the way that I've structured this is I've built it around basically the same process I took to rebuild myself when I was at, basically less than zero after losing everything. And the idea is you take somebody, as long as they're an expert, and turn them into a recognized authority. It's not just the PR, but then it's how you use it in your market. So where a lot of people go wrong is they'll get featured somewhere, Financial Times, Entrepreneur, whatever. They'll go and they'll share a link to the post, which, you just share a link on social media and the visibility is going to be shit to begin with. But that's about all they do. Hey, I'm honored to be included in this, blah, blah, blah. And then that's it. They don't do another thing with it ever again. That's how most people approach it. On the other hand, like when we're working with a client, what we'll do is we'll actually go through and help them find ways to turn a particular feature into a ton of content. So let's say you wrote an article for a major outlet. You can now go in there and take little nuggets of that article and turn those into little quote graphics. You can go and make a video talking about the things that you weren't able to talk about in there because of time and space requirements, right? You can go and, take a section of that and then expand on that section and create a whole other family of content. So there's all these things that you can do with this publicity, and then you leverage it in your marketing, and it just creates this outsized perception of what you're doing, but it also trains the algorithm to show your content to more people more frequently. So that's the real difference. It's not just earning the publicity, but then leveraging it.
Yeah, I like that you say earning the publicity, because you see a lot of people that's like, maybe it's on their website or on their social media. It's like featured in Fox or, all the outlets, right? The major outlets. It's like, were you really featured in that? Number one. Number two is, why were you featured in that? Did you pay to be featured in it, or were you featured in it because you're an expert in the space and they called on you to comment on something? I see this in our industry where people pay to get into things to get better publicity. Can you talk about that part of the space? Like, is it bad to pay to get onto Forbes, or how does that all work?
So I'm going to give you kind of an answer of, it depends, right? So the truth is, to some degree, literally everything in the world is pay to play, right? That's just the reality of the world. Now, there is legitimate organic features, whether it's us pitching a story to a journalist, or a journalist knows that we have a contact, or a journalist knows who an expert on a thing is and they reach out to them. Whatever the case is, all of that organic stuff, that's good to go. There is the paid side where, you've got these companies that have relationships with these outlets where they will publish an article, the top 10 people that you need to be following in crypto, that they then publish on Forbes or, CNBC or whatever. Those used to carry some weight with people, never with journalists, because journalists always knew they were bullshit. But it's getting to the point where even, ordinary people who aren't in the media industry, even ones who aren't entrepreneurs, are starting to see through some of the bullshit. They're starting to see, and they can identify the paid media ops versus organic, legitimate features. So there can be a time and a place for it, but a lot of the time, paying to be featured in something is generally going to be counterproductive.
Okay, so let's say I'm a local expert at real estate here in our Florida market, and I'm like, man, I need more awareness. I need more clientele. How do I get connected to and get into media? How do I get a big spread in an awesome magazine? Do I have to hire a PR firm? Like, how does that happen? Like, what's the mechanics of that?
So really, the answer is very much a broad gradient, right? You absolutely can do it yourself if you have the time, knowledge, and, resources. You can also hire somebody to do it. It really comes down to what you want to focus on. If you're kind of brand new, getting started out, you don't have much of a budget, by all means, do it yourself. You're going to learn a lot in the process that will help you not just on the PR side, but just across the board, right? Because if you're out here doing your own PR, then you're also going to be getting a lot more used to engaging with people, communicating. You're going to become more confident. So it becomes really powerful for you that way. And when you get to the point of hiring a firm, you have a better understanding for how things go. So you're going to be a lot better at filtering through which agencies are good and which agencies aren't, as well as understanding how things work. So you're not going to go into it with unrealistic expectations. In fact, that's one of my favorite clients is anytime they've tried to do their own PR and then they come to us, it's like, awesome. You're my favorite person today. Yeah. So
you've already been through the pain of it all.
Yes. So that's a huge part of it. On the hiring side, yeah, absolutely. You could definitely do that. You just have to do your due diligence. Look at the agency. Go see what kind of reviews they have online. Go look at some testimonials on their website, right? Video testimonials, not text testimonials with some random picture that's, Bill C in Ohio says, this is the best company ever. Like none of that. But, legitimate reviews on a third-party site, like, your Google business profile or something like that, their LinkedIn page is another great place to look. And then, evaluate them, look them up online, add words like, such and such name complaints, scam, things like that. You start throwing out things to see if there's pissed off people out there. And not to say that anything necessarily is the end all be all answer, right? Take everything you see with a grain of salt either way. But you really want to dig into, what they're doing, what kind of results they're getting, what people are saying about them before you end up working with somebody. So there's either way they can go with that. In fact, on the DIY side, I've been meaning to mention this to you anyway, but we've actually got a 3-day challenge coming up here pretty soon that we're going to be rolling out for teaching people some of the strategies and tactics that we use.
Oh, that's incredible. That's brilliant. Yeah, definitely make sure you send me the link to that. I'll include it in this podcast. Hopefully it's timely enough. So that's really interesting. I think, because this is so foreign to a lot of particularly small businesses, even maybe some mid-tier businesses. Who is your ideal client? Like who should be using media, your media particularly, and why?
So it's something that anybody can benefit from, but in order for us to work with them, they have to kind of fit a few criteria. One, they have to actually be an expert at whatever it is they do. Now, they don't have to be the biggest person. They don't have to have the biggest following. None of that. They could basically be obscure. They could be a ghost as long as they are a legitimate expert. And that's pretty easy to identify within a few minutes of a conversation, I think, most of the time. They have to be willing to step outside of their comfort zone. I will tell you that once we start getting into PR, people realize really quickly where their weaknesses are. You start getting them on a TV interview, especially if it's live. You start seeing people's eyes get about this big. They start getting panicked, heart rate spikes. So they have to be willing to kind of get outside of that comfort zone and do the things that are going to be scary, uncomfortable, painful, whatever, until you get good at them. And then they have to realize that they're the expert at what they do. They are not the expert at what we do. So they have to be coachable. They have to be willing to listen. That case of the guy with the press release, perfect example of that. He thought he knew what he was doing, didn't follow our advice, and it had a significant negative outcome for him. And had I not had a great relationship with that journalist, it would have hurt me as far as that business relationship goes as well. So that's kind of my criteria there. If they want to get out there and do big things and impact people in a big way, and they meet those 3 criteria, that's kind of who I'm looking for.
Yeah, there's a couple things that happen with businesses. There are engineer type people who build amazing businesses, systematize, process. They get it super efficient, operationally efficient, and they'll have the best product in the world across industry. But they won't be as successful as they could be because nobody knows about their product.
Right.
And you see this, and we've seen people who get attention using media resources grow massive wealth. Mr. Beast, Gary V was one of the kind of early ones, and these are people leveraging primarily social, but there's also people who come get on TV, have a show. I'm thinking our buddy Dolmar has got a show. He's becoming more prevalent in the real estate space. We've got the Kids Who Flip show coming out. Like those things will help to expand your capability, your capacity for business because you have attention. Mm-hmm. Grant Cardone's another great example. Whether you love him or you hate him, it doesn't matter because you're watching him. And he knows that.
Well, we're living in an attention economy, right?
Attention is currency.
Yep.
And that's exactly right. So media, whether it's paid traffic, social, news, TV, doesn't really matter. It's all about attention. Mm-hmm. Good, bad, or indifferent. Ideally good, in my opinion. I personally would not violate my principles and core values for attention. Right. Some others are willing to do that. I'm not. It's just not who I am. But that might hurt me as a business owner because I'm unwilling to be a little corrosive on social media, creating dichotomies between people and is this bad or good or, I don't personally love it, but it probably hurts me. So yeah, media is really important. What Spartan Media does is really cool because you guys have such a deeper capability than I think what most small business owners are accustomed to. They're very accustomed to just like a marketing agency who does paid ads, but they don't really understand kind of the broader brand type marketing. They don't understand how to get into TV or into a really, really well thought about like Spread and Forbes or something like that. So yeah, that could be a literal game changer for people. And you made a great point earlier. when you position yourself as an expert in an industry, because you are, your business will do better. Like if you're an expert and nobody knows, it's hard to continue to acquire clients and get business. But if you're an expert and everybody knows, business will just start pouring onto you. So I think it's incredible what you guys do. And I know you do a lot for the veteran side too. Would love to hear what you guys and what you do from a media perspective do with veterans, just because it's got a special place in my heart.
Yeah, that one's always been kind of I'll call that like for lack of a better word, kind of a bittersweet aspect of my life, because of, as you know, in our world, how things go. Definitely lost some great guys. So I've wanted to, help fellow veterans for a long time. Something we didn't talk about, and I don't know if you and I have actually ever even talked about this part, is when I went through that health crisis and I was on my deathbed for about 2 years, I was in so much pain that I got to a point where I didn't want to die, but, I would walk around the house and, you see a gun on the shelf or tucked away in the corner or whatever. And it's like, man, I don't want to go, but shit, that's an easy out right there. And, had these thoughts often enough that I was like, all right, well, I think I need to do something. Went ahead and unloaded and disassembled everything, tossed it into a duffel bag. And I called a buddy of mine, another vet. And I was like, look, man, we're not at a point where we need to be worried, but I may be calling you and asking you to take this bag and store it at your place for a bit. And he's like, absolutely, man, just say the word. And I think it was the next day, one of the toughest Marines that I served with took his life. And that was a huge eye opener for me, because I know what I had gone through. And here's, the thoughts that I'm having. And I knew how tough he was. And for that to happen, changed my perspective on it, where, up to that point, like most of us, I always thought that if somebody did that because, they're weak, they chose the easy way out. And after seeing a few friends go through that and going through some of that myself, it changed my perspective. And so I started, talking about the challenges that I was going through, being very vocal about it, not just from a, here's the problem, here's what I'm facing, but also here's, how I'm feeling about it. Here's how it's affecting me, explaining, the behind the scenes as well. And part of it was cathartic. It was like a release, but part of it was, kind of to help other people. And what happened was, over time, and it felt uncomfortable as hell to do that initially, but over time, we got to a point where people started reaching out and DMing me and be like, hey, like, I don't want to say this publicly, but that, like, completely, I was in such a dark place and that turned my mind around, like, that post was amazing and completely, like, reset my day, whatever. And so I keep getting all these messages, and then that turned into people reaching out when they needed help. And then that turned into people asking me if they could connect me with people who needed help. And then basically it got to a point where everybody knew that they could just give my cell number out to anybody who was going through some shit like that. And at this point, I've probably counseled hundreds, if not thousands of people. And there's a certain number, I know what it is, I'll never disclose it, but there is a certain number of people that I know that I have saved from suicide because they specifically told me that they were on the last thread, and, I helped pull them back. There's also an undetermined number that I've helped. So whatever that number is, I don't know what that number is, but basically that's something that I've done to kind of give back to the veteran community. In fact, Fox News wrote an article about that, I don't know, a year or two ago on that story. But that's one of the things I've been doing, probably for 11 years at this point. And then also, each year I'll pick some veteran company or nonprofit organization, and I will basically do work for them pro bono, on a PR perspective.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think generally the people in our country understand there's a veteran suicide problem, particularly when you come out of a war, whether it's the Gulf War or, the Iraq and Afghanistan stuff. But it's more real than anybody could even really wrap their mind around. I was in a unit, an organization in the Marine Corps out in 29 Palms, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. I was an animal company or alpha company, and I was a weapons platoon guy, and I was deployed with another platoon. And a platoon is about 40 people, and I was with 2nd Platoon on deployment. We lost one guy on deployment that wasn't in that platoon specifically. And of those 40 guys from my weapons platoon, so we all went on this journey in this 2004 to 2008 timeline. And along the way, people did their 4 years and they got out. Since that time, 11 of the 40 have committed suicide. So you think about that.
Surprise me. Yeah.
Well, I literally, as recent as a couple of months ago, an 0331, which is a machine gunner, For people that don't understand what I'm talking about, that's a job in the Marine Corps Infantry where you're an expert at shooting machine guns. And Jordan Sullivan, at the time, he was Corporal Sullivan, just big, massive guy, phenomenal combat leader. You just look at this guy, you go, man, that guy's like Superman, a hero to me. And we're in 2024, 2 decades later, and he committed suicide 2 months ago. And to your point, it's like, gosh, that guy is like, man, if he's susceptible to that, like, how does it get that bad? Like, how can you become that? There's so many thoughts that go with this, but it's a real problem. Folks in the military, they're just, like we said in the beginning, you are entrusted with the type of responsibility that most people could never understand in a lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, how many 18-year-olds, how many 18-year-olds, that have to write their own will, for Christ's sakes, Yeah.
So it's a big deal. It's thank you for doing, it may feel like sometimes people think like, I don't know, I don't have much to give. It's like the smallest things can literally be the difference in somebody having a glimmer of hope and not.
Absolutely.
You don't know how many people you could impact in the veteran community just by, how you talk to them, how you treat them, anything you do does make an impact. I think that's important to reiterate because it does I think people kind of get callous to it over time. It's like, oh yeah, the veterans, thanks for your service. But
it's a bumper sticker for most people.
Yeah, it's a bumper sticker and it shouldn't be because there are 18 and 22-year-olds today who are doing extraordinary things in defense and in service of this country, and they pay a price for that.
Yeah. Have you seen the stats on that lately?
I haven't seen any recent stats on it, but I'm betting they're not good.
No. So for the longest time, the publicized stats were 22 per day.
Yeah.
Last I saw, it's somewhere in the 19 to 20 range, but still, it's an outrageous number. 22 veterans every single day, or 20, 22, whatever the number is, are taking their lives every single day.
Yeah, and for kind of context, at any given time, less than 1% of the people in the United States are in the military. So It's not like they're a large percentage of the population, and 20 people a day committing suicide out of the veteran community is astronomical.
Yeah.
It's too much. One is too many, honestly.
Amen.
So, well, man, I appreciate what you do. I think what you're doing is really cool. I see you helping the veterans all the time. I see you being very, very proactive. Like, you're a big giver. Like, I always see you connecting people and giving. So, and I'm proud to know you, man. I'm proud that you're a veteran, proud to call you a friend. And I'm grateful that you were able to come on and spend some time with me. If any business owners are really thinking about upping their media game, how can they get in contact with you or check out Spartan Media?
Man, I am easy to find and get a hold of. If they Google my name or go to SpartanMedia.com, it's pretty easy to find me, and they can reach out to me through there.
Awesome. So you can Google Jeremy's name or go to SpartanMedia.com. He's super active on social media too, so you can find him there as well. And we'll drop the links below or in the comments or wherever this is syndicated at. So, man, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.